Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of In the Box, episode 19. We are just 3 days away from the trade deadline. We're recording this on Tuesday night. Babiak, how are you doing?
I love all these trades. It finally feels like this is a real sports league. I
Yeah, we
love
had
it.
we had like the pre-Four Nations deadline. Then I thought shit would kind of go down over Four Nations for guys that just weren't playing. Nothing happened. Saturday, all hell breaks loose. I'm in Brooklyn. I couldn't make any videos or anything on it. But yeah, we got three sizable trade, one massive trade, obviously, and then two other pretty notable trades, as well as one that went down a couple hours ago that we're going to talk about in Seth Jones, Trent Frederic, Ryan Lindgren, Gustav Nyquist. Then we're just going to do like a deadline preview of just like who we think's going to get traded or not, as well as go over the Charlie Lindgren extension. And at the end, maybe talk some Oscars, talk the Academy Awards like we have before on this page. But yeah, let's dive into it. Let's not waste any time. Seth Jones is now a member of the Florida Panthers. The full deal is Seth Jones. The Blackhawks are retaining $2.5 million, so he's only at a $7 million cap hit. A 2026 fourth-round pick to Florida for a 2026 first-round pick that could slide to 2027 if they so deem that they want to trade their 2026. But it's first-round pick. It's conditional, but it's first-round pick. It's not like it's going to revert to something else. As well as Spencer Knight, who makes $4.5 million. I'll throw it over to you because I kind of already made a full YouTube video on this, but I'll bounce off you after you give your initial thoughts.
All right. I think it's very, very risky for Florida, first and foremost. Seth Jones, for a while, the narrative has been, well, he's a bad contract, but he's really not that bad of a player, given the context of Chicago. That has not been true at all this year. 2023, Chicago's XG rate was 6% better with him on the ice. 2024, they were 4% better. So it's like, you're paying him for more than that, you'd hope, but Chicago's an awful team. They're making do with what they have. This year, they're minus 1%. Chicago has been worse with Seth Jones on the ice this year than off it. Now, is that an accurate reflection of his skill level? Maybe not. It's been very, very clear how uninterested he is and how unengaged he is in playing hockey for the Blackhawks.
Yeah, the quote's
That's been pretty public.
He made it public a week ago by saying we're the same team that we were on game one. But that eventually led to this. But continue.
Yeah, So in a big way, Florida's kind of just betting on like, oh, if we can get Seth Jones to give a shit, he will go back to being like a really nice two-way second pair or number two guy on a top pair type defenseman, which maybe he will, but that's a really big risk, and it ties you up salary-wise. Among other things, I don't see how or why you would re-sign Aaron Ekblad if you're paying Seth Jones all this money. The window seems gone on that specifically.
Yeah, with Seth Jones, I was looking at those stats too. I would argue in terms of the Chicago stats this year, they are just so bad, and also like he's playing the tougher minutes, 25 minutes a night against the best competition. But yeah, I'm a little bit more positive on it for Florida, but I still think it's an overpayment, giving up a first-round pick, giving up your potential future franchise goalie when you don't really have anything else in the pipeline, and your current goalie's 36 years old. Yeah, I think just in a reduced role on that second pair with the Nico Mikkola, he can find a lot of success. Florida just overall, their second pair right-handed defenseman was Dmitry Kulikov, who's like the definition of a third pair guy. So they needed to do something. Could they have used their assets a lot more efficiently than Seth Jones, still at a $7 million cap hit? We talk about it so much, the cap rising, but he's also 30 years old. So like you might get the cap curve, but also the age curve is going to happen for Seth Jones, where, for a guy like Bill Zito that has historically kind of like bought low, and they've been like master classes with the Brandon Montour for a third-round pick, bringing in a Carter Verhaeghe. Sam Reinhart was a far better player, traded a first and Devin Levi to get him. This is a little bit uncharacteristic for Bill Zito, but at the end of the day, they're cup or bust the next 3 to 4 years. Seth Jones fits the age of their core roughly. So like it's in this market where if Ivan Provorov was on the market, maybe they would do something with him in terms of a rental deal. There really weren't any serious options in terms of clearly upgrading their second pair. Like David Savard, I guess they maybe could have thrown a decent amount. Mario Ferraro is like not that good of a guy. He eats big minutes on San Jose, but he's not that effective on it. So like I definitely see from the Florida perspective, like we've been so successful in the playoffs the last couple of years. We don't know how much longer we're going to be able to contend at an extremely high rate. So for the next 3 years, and let's just get ahead on Aaron Ekblad, instead of giving him an 8-year deal at $7 million, we just have Seth Jones on a 5x7 that we can live with for the next 5 years. Meanwhile, Aaron Ekblad, like Seth Jones might just be straight up better than Aaron Ekblad right now. So from a Florida perspective, yeah, I gave it like a B minus. It hasn't really changed. He played very good in his first game. He played almost 23 minutes and had a 78% expected goals percentage and killed 7 penalties. But yeah, I can't see this turning into like a home run deal for Pan. Like, even if Seth Jones turns into being a very good top pair defenseman, they still gave up a first round pick and a young 23-year-old goalie with a sizable NHL track record.
Yeah, the first round pick is whatever. I think a first round pick's a normal, fair price in this situation. But I'm really, really high on Spencer Knight. Like, the guy is still just 23 years old. That's a baby in goalie
80
years.
NHL games, too.
He's been
solid.
inconsistent in his early stretches when he was, like, record-breaking young goalie for just how young he was when he was getting minutes. Took the year off last year for mental health reasons. This year has looked really good, I think. Has not looked completely amazing. I wouldn't expect him to displace Bobrovsky from the net, but he's shown clear improvement this year. He also had a great first game, right?
41 out of 42 against the LA Kings to lead to a win, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of the rebuilding teams kind of either ignore the goalie part or leave the goalie part until the very end. If I'm Chicago, I'm looking at this like, we just sold... We should not have been able to sell high on Seth Jones, and we maybe got a franchise goalie out of this.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. If you told me 2 weeks ago that they were going to retain $2.5 million, I thought they would have got like a second-round pick. Like at best, if they got a first-round pick just straight up, I would have said that was fantastic work from a Chicago perspective. Getting Spencer Knight when, other young rebuilding teams like San Jose had to pay a fair amount to get Askarov, but they have their franchise netminder. You look at Montreal, Jacob Fowler in the pipeline. Detroit has Augustine and Kosa. Chicago had really nothing. They reached on Adam Guyan in the 2023 draft, 35th overall. He has an 888 at the college level for University of Minnesota Duluth, so I think you can kind of cross him out. No offense, probably not turning into anything. Drew Commesso is 22 years old, had a decent AHL season last year, but now he's down to an 899. So yeah, for Chicago, like they filled an NHL need right now, and he's 23 years old. On top of getting a first-round pick, I mentioned in my video, they got to trade that first-round pick if I'm Chicago to potentially make some kind of move to get Bedard help. I don't think, especially if this pick somehow slides to 2027, they have so many goddamn prospects and so many like B-plus prospects that they would probably get at the 28th overall pick in 2026 or 2027. So for Chicago, you pick up your potential franchise netminder, but you can't draft another good prospect. You got to go do something. They have like 10 B-plus prospects right now. Be aggressive. Do something this offseason. They tried to bring in some veterans. You need to bring in a serious impact guy to help Connor Bedard. It's getting ridiculous.
The one concern I have for Chicago, and it's a small concern, because if Spencer Knight is on the table, you do it. But retaining on Seth Jones is tough to swallow, not money-wise, but because it's for 5 years. Yeah. You only have the 3 retention spots. One of them is locked up long-term now. We've seen with San Jose how that's made things kind of complicated. Because San Jose retained on everyone they sold, and now they don't have any retention spots for this year's deadline.
Mm-hmm. They got lucky with Dallas having the Sagan money freed up, yeah.
But that could be an issue for Chicago if Chicago's bad next year or 2 years from now, and again in the position of selling at the deadline. If you're in a spot where, I can't retain on a guy because we're stuck retaining for 5 years. Do I put up with that for Spencer Knight? Of course I do, but it's the one, at least like, hey, be cautious of this bit of it for Chicago.
Yeah, this season they're already at 3 with Rantanen, funny enough, as well as Jake McCabe. But those are over after this. So they still get 2, but yeah, as you mentioned, like they're not going to have retention spots for a while. San Jose went wild with it. How Hurdle's like 6 years. Carlson at the time was 4 years. So Chicago will be able to get off some of those retention spots this summer. But yeah, thankfully Ryan Donato only makes $2 million. So that's easy. You can get that done. Most teams that are like Brock Nelson makes $6 million. Kyle Palmieri makes 5. So even at half retained, those guys are still more expensive than Ryan Donato. So that doesn't really impact them too much this year. I guess if they wanted to move off some other guys within their system, but I think Donato is really the only guy that they're going to get anything positive. But yeah, for a guy in Kyle Davidson that I've critiqued a decent amount because of his drafting and maybe some of his deals, I think he really hit this out of the park in terms of getting a for sure NHL level guy as well as a good asset and moving off a guy that torpedoed your entire franchise and was a problem that he inherited from Stan Bowman. Like Seth Jones, Sherman's a great guy. He was the bane of Kyle Davidson's existence basically ever since he got the job, and now he's like mostly off it.
Every single data point this year has shown us that being tall and right-handed and physical matters more for a defenseman's trade value than actually being good at hockey. That's every single year you're wondering, like, is this going to be the year where that's not true? And GMs will be like, no, I need to make sure the guy's good at hockey before I do premium assets. And every single year it's nope, that big right-handed guy got moved for way more than I thought he was going to.
Yeah, that's a great point. Jacob Trouba and Seth Jones moved off for positive assets in the year 2025 or 2024 in 2025. It's one of the most shocking trades. Were you shocked when it happened?
I was.
So.
I was really shocked that Florida
first.
Went in for it.
Yeah, I thought maybe Florida would go for like an Erik Karlsson. Seth Jones is, just because he has 5 more years after this, was pretty surprising. But knowing them again, even though I think they gave up too much, I'm sure he's going to turn into a beast. Part of that because of the system, part of that because of the roster talent. But there definitely is still something for Seth Jones. I feel like in a weird way, he went from overrated to underrated almost. His end of this Columbus run, he was overrated. Then he was underrated because he was just overpaid. If that makes sense.
It makes sense. I would have said that was true last season.
Fair.
This season, he's been so mediocre and so checked out, I would have a really hard time making that argument.
You want to move on to the Trent Frederic trade that just went down.
Let's do it.
A couple hours ago. This one might have been, when I heard the return for this one, I might have been even more shocked than, say, the Seth Jones trade. Trent Frederic is heading to the Edmonton Oilers as well as Max Jones for a second-round pick. That's St. Louis's second-round pick, not even Edmonton's second-round pick, and a fourth-round pick from Edmonton as well as Max Wanner. No clue who that is. The New Jersey Devils are retaining 50% on Trent Frederic for Shane LaChance, who we'll dive into. Funny story with him. Yeah, I think that this is a big-time overpayment for a guy that's still hurt, has some kind of ankle injury. Apparently, he said he's going to be back sooner rather than later. No clue what exactly that means. But yeah, he sucked this year. He had 8 goals, 7 assists, 15 points, 57 games. I get he's a big body. I get bottom 6 physicality come playoff time. Like, you're looking for a guy like Trent Frederic. But to give up a mid-second round pick, like I think we agree the St. Louis Blues probably aren't making a playoff push down the stretch. Actually, they could just because Vancouver's so bad. But most likely, this is going to end up being like 45th overall. Not saying like Edmonton should have kept the pick, but I feel like it just could have been far more effectively used. And if anything, I didn't think a bottom 6 forward was exactly Edmonton's top need. Yeah, it's just an overpayment for the Boston Bruins. You love to see it. Moving off Trent Frederic getting this kind of return. And they should seriously consider trading guys like Brandon Carlo, Morgan Geekie, Justin Brazeau at this point, because they're not making the playoffs and they need to do some kind of retool.
I'm much higher on Trent Frederic than you are. I mean, this year's been rough. Last year had 40 points, 38 even strength points. That's a lot of production out of a number 3 center. So if he has that kind of offensive upside to him in Edmonton, I really like this trade. Granted, again, it's a risk. I do think the second and the fourth is an overpay. The fact that he's injured makes it risky. The fact that Edmonton's already traded their first this summer means like they're done. They're out of assets. They do not have any more 2025 ammo to get another guy.
Yeah, they're gonna have to dip even later.
But yeah, I think Edmonton's need is the bottom 6 forward group. I mean, these days their defense is pretty good. Overall, the top 6 is great, of course. Although that bottom 6 needs scoring, right? It can't just be defense and grit. You need that depth scoring for when McDavid and Draisaitl aren't on the ice in the playoffs. We've seen it a couple years now where their real issue is, they just get nothing out of the team when McDavid and Draisaitl are off the ice. Like it for Boston because they turned a decent player, but very low value. They should have had to sell very low, and they didn't. They sold reasonably high.
Pick. Yeah, I thought like a late third-round pick or something like that from an actual contender.
And good for them for committing to selling. For the New Jersey Devils, this is like the worst trade I have ever seen in my life. And that's really funny to hammer in on because their part of this is so small. LeChance is the son of their scouting director.
Nepo, baby!
The New Jersey Devils are contenders this year. You only have so many retention slots. Are they going to use those slots to make their team better, to like work something out that benefits their team? Nope. They're going to use the retention slot to get a 6th-round draft pick, Nepo baby. That's what that is. Even like that amount of retention. Those retention brokers should be worth like...
How much money is it total?
It's like $1 million something, so not a lot. But that should be worth more than a 6th-round pick anyway, right? Teams are getting like 3rds and 4ths for doing the partial retention like that.
I will say, I mean, he's not that young. He's 21 years old, turning 22 in August. He is 6'5", having a pretty good season at the college level, 25 points in 30 games at Boston University. But yeah, it definitely was a little bit head scratching when I saw 3-team deal. I was like, oh, maybe New Jersey's picking something up like Justin Brazeau from the Boston Bruins. And when I saw that, I don't at this point, like if I'm the Devils with Jack Hughes' health, unless like they might miss the playoffs. Like I don't know. It's possible. It is possible with Jack Hughes being out where like if I'm ownership, I don't know if I'm allowing Tom Fitzgerald to buy right now. I mean, because if they missed the playoffs, he should get fired. Even with the Jack Hughes injury, say he missed the rest of the regular season. Jacob Markstrom missed some games, but thankfully the Four Nations break happened. Like, I don't know. Like Fitzgerald is definitely on the hot seat right now, and if I'm ownership, I'm not sure if I'm letting him. They also don't have a 1st-round pick too, so that's also something to consider. But I don't know if I'm letting Tom Fitzgerald try to go down and save his job potentially by trading all these assets. I think they rightfully so should be in wait and see. I'm not saying that this is like a good move in that kind of wait and see. Use your cap space, weaponize your cap space. But I disagree with you that they should be like ultra aggressive based on what they've shown themselves to be the last month and a half.
I don't know if they even need to be ultra aggressive, but there's literally 1,000 ways you could have better spent that $1 million of cap space than to pick up some guy's kid. Presumably, that's the whole reason for it. I'm certain it's if this was just any random 6th-round pick, I would just be scratching my head and thinking, that's a little strange. The fact that it is the son of their scouting director, it's embarrassing. Devils fans should not be happy about this, and maybe they shouldn't buy. And I do agree. I don't see how the Devils can possibly miss the playoffs given how bad the rest of the East is.
We'll talk about that. We're also doing Eastern Conference, Western Conference.
I do agree with that much. If this 2% chance that they miss the playoffs happens, I agree Fitzgerald should be on the hot seat because this is so much his team. He's made so many big swings, and frankly, a bunch of them haven't really worked out, right? The Timo Meier trade at the time, everyone loved it, hasn't really worked out. The Dougie Hamilton signing looked really good at the time. It was good for the first year and a half or so when the team wasn't really good enough to take advantage. The last 2 years, it really doesn't look like it's worked out too much.
He's playing like 1950. He's still a very good offensive defenseman, don't get me wrong, but he's playing like 1950 a night. That's because the Devils do have a pretty balanced defense core. But they're in a weird spot. Again, I think that they make the playoffs. I still think it's like an 85% likelihood. But unlike you, I do think that they have kind of been in free fall of late where I could see them missing. I could potentially see them missing. You want to move on to the Lindgren trade?
Let's do it.
Sticking in the New York City metro area, Ryan Lindgren, of all people, also got a 2nd and a 4th-round pick. Lindgren and Jimmy Vesey for Calvin DeHaan. The Rangers' probably going to be the Rangers' 2nd round pick. It's between them and Carolina, but I think right now we'd bet on Carolina going further in the playoffs or making the playoffs over the Rangers. And a 4th-round pick for DeHaan and Parsenian. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Yeah, I really don't like this for the Colorado Avalanche. I understand that Lindgren probably is better than Calvin DeHaan, but I don't think people realize how bad Ryan Lindgren has been this season and even last season as well. As I got some stats. Him and Fox in 601 minutes this season, a 49.1% goals percentage and 49.5% expected goals percentage. You compare that to him and Fox and Keandre Miller, 65.4% goals percentage, 67.4 expected goals percentage. And Keandre Miller is definitely a better player than Ryan Lindgren, but not 16% goals percentage and 18% expected goals percentage. And even last year, they had a 46.5% expected goals percentage, him and Fox was better with everybody else by a decent margin. So he's had, and I know Adam Fox's stock is at an all-time low, but like even if you hate the dude, he's still a top 8 to 15 defenseman in the entire NHL. He has had one of the better defensemen as his partner the last season and a half, and he has stunk it up. He previously was in a damn good, maybe not elite, a damn good defensive defenseman, but it's not even the advanced stats, it's the eye test. He just is out of place. He's taking the dumbest penalties possible. Like, I watch a decent amount of Rangers. I can't just believe that he's going to completely turn it around. I agree, third pair minutes sheltered. He's going to be better. But to pay similarly to, I think the Rangers pick is going to be a little bit later than the Blues, but not by much. 48th through 52nd overall pick and a fourth round pick to get Ryan Lindgren. There's way better uses of your assets. And again, I understand that it's not a ton of defensemen out there right now, but yeah, this is a sizable overpayment, and it wouldn't surprise me if Calvin DeHaan is honestly better than Ryan Lindgren the rest of this season.
It's funny. I'm realizing now every single player that we get to talk about on the show today has been really productive in recent memory and has just had an awful season this year. Every single one of them. Lindgren, I would bet on the least to turn it around because he just, like you said, right? He has struggled so much. And it's frankly inexcusable because he's in the position of being the less pressure guy on a pair with one of the best defensemen in the
sit
league.
Back and defend.
There's really no excuse for him to be so poor defensively this year. It doesn't make sense. So he's regressed at such a young age. Now, granted, Colorado in recent history has traded for Jack Johnson and Josh Manson. Both of those trades I thought were like atrocious.
Yeah.
Colorado, you're a good team. You're smarter than this. What are you doing going for those guys? And in both cases, those guys turned out, decent enough, well exceeding my expectations. So they seem to be like reasonably pretty good at picking out reclamation projects and, I can fix him. He looks atrocious right now, but I've seen what he did 3 years ago and I can fix him. They've done that successfully a couple of times. So it's possible, but I don't see it happening.
Yeah. Maybe with him again, they re-sign him at some 3-year contract at $3 million and he rehabs his game. But for a team that Colorado that has such high expectations, it's just rather underwhelming. I don't expect Jimmy Vesey to be that much of an impact guy. And yeah, I think Ryan Lindgren's going to be playing a third pair 17 minutes a night, and you gave up a decently valuable second-round pick for a guy that I'd be more worried about ruining my team come playoff time than like providing stability on that third pair. A lot of people disagreed, and maybe I'll end up being wrong. But again, even at half retained, he's still $2.25 million. It's not even like he's that cheap. Just not a fan remotely of this. But it's clearly a seller's market. I will say it has aged better relative because Seth Jones got a first and a 23-year-old potential stud goaltender. Trent Frederic got a second and fourth. So from that perspective, it's more understandable why they paid so much. I guess in other deadlines, this would have been a third and a fourth round pick by comparison. But maybe I just wouldn't have made a move if this was on my plate and this was the only move available. Call me crazy. I know you don't want to waste the prime of McKinnon and McCarr, but just way too much for me to swallow.
Yeah, this is definitely at least medium risk. And the risk isn't about the money. It isn't about the contracts. It isn't about the draft picks you gave up because all of that part is low risk. It's like you said, the real risk here is what if we lose a playoff game because Ryan Lindgren is really bad?
Yeah, like we're gonna have Trent Frederic or Gustav Nyquist that we're gonna talk about. Like, don't have that potential downside that a Ryan Lindgren has. And again, I hate. Yeah, you mentioned with like the picks and stuff. Obviously, there's a chance that second round pick never plays a game in the goddamn NHL. That fourth round pick too. But it's about what you could have potentially gotten.
The opportunity.
Yes, like I hate that argument when people revisit trades. And it's like we gave a first round pick, but it turned into a bust. First off, you don't know if your team would have drafted that guy. And second off, it's.
Who else could you have gotten for that first round pick?
I saw someone going back to Seth Jones trade being like, who cares if they win a Stanley Cup? Like, no fucking shit. If the Edmonton Oilers win a Stanley Cup, does that make the Darnell Nurse contract good? Like, it's all relative to what you give up. Even if your team might be successful, it doesn't mean that this isolated trade was a good use of assets good asset management from Chris McFarland. And he's a guy that I've been decently critical on. And in fairness, the Rantanen trade is looking pretty solid in terms of that. But yeah, this move definitely left my head scratching. And I really like it for the New York Rangers, for a team that can either use those picks to buff up the prospect pool or flip it this offseason in terms of if they still think that this core has what it takes to go on a run next season.
I also want to say just Jimmy VC is a fourth liner. He's been a fourth liner his whole career. Even 10 years into his career, people are still, I guess, attached to his college hype and hoping he'll end up being more than a fourth liner. Yeah. He has never been that in his career, and he's 30 now. I don't see that changing at all. No, not an impact.
He's going to bounce back. All right, our last somewhat big trade that we need to talk about, Gustav Nyquist got traded to the Minnesota Wild for a 2026 second-round pick. At the 2023 deadline, he also got traded to the Minnesota Wild. And I was surprised. He only played 3 regular season games, but he had 5 points with them, and then 0 goals, 5 assists in 6 games when they lost to Dallas, I think, in the 2023 playoffs. Yeah, Nyquist last year, definitely a little bit fluky. That Forsberg, Ryan O'Reilly line with him just like had an insane season. So like we never thought that he was a legit, consistent 70-point guy. And he also is 35 years old. But I think he's definitely somewhere between last season and this season, considering he has 21 points in 57 games. I still think he's an impact middle six guy. And when looking at the top 6 of the Minnesota Wild, they got Rossi, Ek, Kaprizov, Boldy, Zuccarello. They needed one more name, or just he could play on the third line. I think it's fair. I think for a Minnesota team, I'm not sure you're ready to go all in. I think more so the following seasons, once you get that salary cap back from Parise and Suter, as enticing as it maybe would be to throw in Kaprizov on LTIR till the playoffs is and make some kind of Brock Nelson splash. I don't know if this team's fully ready to kind of be at that contending stage. So yeah, I like it. It's not that big of a price, assuming that he's somewhere in between last year and this year, or just like a solid middle six guy. It's a perfectly fine for Nashville. You had to move off him. You weren't going to re-sign him to some like 2 to 3 year deal to probably miss the playoffs next year as well. It's like B's or B plus is probably B's for both parties. Nashville, although you like the return, it's still like, holy shit, this guy fell off a cliff. We thought if we were trading him next, if you said that we would be out of the playoffs and we were trading Nyquist, you would have assumed that you would have got a first round pick that he was putting up near like 50-point pace. So that's disappointing. But yeah, I don't think this is that. The other trades, maybe some people like a lot for the buyers or dislike a lot. This one, I don't know how you're not just like solid work. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. It's a good enough trade on both sides. In a kind of strange way, I really like it for Minnesota, but I don't think it'll work. I see the vision here, right? Right now, Nyquist is a declining 35-year-old, but last year he was a really good 34-year-old. So who's to say the decline is real? Maybe Nashville's offensive system is such a train wreck that everyone looks terrible there. I can get behind that line of thinking. The second round pick is not too bad, so that's solid. He's a pretty okay, like 1-for-1 Walmart Kaprizov while Kaprizov's out hurt. I mean, they've really been struggling this month without Kaprizov. So you need some wing that you can plug into the top 6 just to temporarily stay afloat and keep your division spot. I think Nyquist is good enough to accomplish that. I don't expect him to have any playoff impact, and I don't expect the team to win a playoff round, but I see the vision and I like the vision.
I think part of this was, I think if like the wild card race is more competitive in the West, I don't know if they're buying it all, but like they're safely going to make the playoffs just because Vancouver and Calgary are no real threat to pass them. One thing that's interesting with their top 6, it's kind of small. You got now Nyquist, who's like 5'11", Zuccarello, Kaprizov's kind of undersized, Rossi I think is like 5'11". It's interesting how they're going to be able to fare against some of the bigger teams. You think about like a Dallas Stars or a Colorado Avalanche, like they might get a little bit bodied. So from that perspective, maybe it's not a perfect fit, but for a buy low candidate, you're not going to get a better bang for your buck than Kaprizov. Like you could go after Ryan Donato, but he's probably going to cost a first round pick just because he's playing so good. He's putting up like 30 and 30 pace. So it just makes sense in terms of trying to reinvigorate this player. And there is, although he played 9 games total in Minnesota, he's been around the franchise for 2 months back in the 2023 season. So it is a familiar face. Yeah, I just like it for both parties. But as you mentioned, Minnesota, unless they can get back on track, probably going to lose to Dallas or Winnipeg or Colorado, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's going to depend, I guess, how the playoff spots shake out exactly because the Central's so competitive this year. But I wouldn't favor them against any of the three other Central teams right now.
Yeah, that's fair. I feel like we don't have too much to talk about on
No,
that one.
that one was a fair one. That's a fair trade.
We are now going to be talking about the East and the West wild card races because like they're still wide open in my opinion. Now that some teams in the East are kind of just on heaters, while the other teams at the top kind of flounder, as well as the West. The Canucks are just a shit show. So you want to start in the East right now? Who would be your prediction? Let's say the Devils get in on a Metro spot, which you're confident in.
I'm very confident.
I'm not as much, but yeah, who would your two teams be right now?
Right now, I'm going to do the most me thing and put my trust in the goalies and say Rangers at 7, Ottawa at 8.
Okay, that's what I'm probably going with too.
Because those are the two best goalies of any of these teams. I do hope I'm wrong. I hope Columbus can slip in
Columbus,
there.
Ottawa is what I want.
I mean,
yeah.
it would be a fun story, A, and B, it's kind of feeling realistic, right? The Marchenko injury was not that bad. He came back pretty quickly, has been very good since coming back. The Kent Johnston breakout might finally be happening. He's got 4 goals, 7 points in his last 5 games.
Yeah, the season he has like 38 and 44 or something ridiculous.
It took him
like
like 3-ish months to really get cooking, but with Sean Monahan out, they needed him to step up, and he finally
him
has.
and Fantiliev, yeah.
Voronkov is handling the first line role that he got shoved into pretty well. Their young guys are producing. I mean, Ottawa on paper has a better offensive group than Columbus. And in real life, their offense is much worse, kind of because of injuries, but also because of guys just not performing up to their level, right? Claude Giroux this year is not performing up to his level. Columbus is full of guys who you would have penciled in as like mediocre second liners, maybe third liners, playing way beyond their level right now.
Yeah, I think, as you mentioned, Columbus, I think actually I might say Rangers and Jackets right now over Ottawa. Ottawa is thankfully now healthy with Norris and Pinto and Kachuk all getting back. But, dude, they have not been able to really find their rhythm ever since the Levi Merlainen just like took over and had a 925 over 8 games. It has definitely been concerning. The Rangers, even though they're selling again, I don't think them losing Ryan Lindgren could be addition by subtraction. Jesus, as well as Riley Smith. It's not like an impact guy. JT Miller's been amazing for them. I got to be honest. And Shesterkin, as long as he can provide stable goaltending, I do think that they probably pass the Detroit Red Wings. I think Detroit could potentially make a buy move that could make me believe that they're going to make the playoffs. Ottawa's in a tough spot because they don't have one of their first round picks the next 2 years because of the stupid Dodonov trade protection, how they didn't reveal that. So that's going to be tough to see what Ottawa does. Yeah, it really might come down to just who does something big at the deadline, who really moves me in terms of that. Montreal I got to show some love to Montreal because they have won 5 straight, but I think we can agree they're probably not making it into the playoffs. Re-sign Jake Evans on a half-decent deal. So yeah, right now, if I were to power rank them, I think the Rangers might be the most likely to get in. Then the Jackets. Then I'll put the Senators and Wings like tied at number 3. Then the Canadians, and then the Bruins and the Islanders are just embarrassing. Just straight up embarrassments.
The Bruins have the right idea, I think. They're the only team in that group that is selling. So good for them. They are aware of the kind of season that's been going. If you're going to be without your top 2 defensemen, you're not going to make that comeback.
Yeah, if anything, I feel like at this point, Bruins fans, they would obviously want to make the playoffs, but they'll get killed if they play Florida or even Washington at this point. You'd rather tank it up, get that top 10 pick for the first time in a while, and maybe even sell further. But at this point, it's fully going to come down to like the last week of the season, which is awesome for the NHL. And yeah, the East is yet again a shit show in terms of who's going to make the playoffs. In the West, who would you pick right now? Are you rolling with the Vancouver Canucks?
No. Wes, I'll say Colorado holds on.
Oh yeah.
For the 7 spot. We're saying wild card.
That would be crazier than New Jersey.
I'm thinking Calgary for that last spot. I am.
I think I might go Utah. They've won 6 out of their last 9. Sean Thursey is now healthy. They didn't have him for like the entire goddamn season. I don't know if John Marino's coming back relatively soon, but they got a really, in my opinion, a damn good goalie tandem there. Their top six has been playing really good. Clayton Keller has like 70 points in 60 games, what he's been doing in the last month or so. He's been playing like a top 20 player in the entire NHL. Yeah, I think if the Canucks like somewhat pull it together and don't sell Brock Besser, they should make it. But yeah, I might go a little dark horse Utah Hockey Club. They've had stretches where they've been 65% points percentage team over like 10 to 15 games. They've been inconsistent, but I think that they have the best shot to get hot compared to a Calgary and take the final spot over Vancouver.
I like Calgary's raw talent when Kadri and Huberdeau are playing well, which right now, like over the last 3-ish weeks to a month, they have been. Their goalie situation's good.
Yeah, they do have the best goalie out of the three, which is crazy to say because of Demko.
Mackenzie Weegar, fantastic player.
Anderson's been asked, though.
Anderson hasn't been great, but he can rebound. You know, we've seen it from him. I share your total lack of faith in Vancouver. Trading JT Miller did not make Elias Pettersson play better. It's not even making Elias Pettersson take shots in games.
Yeah, he has like
multiple entire games with no shots on goal from Pettersson since that trade.
Yeah, I think the stat is Miller has more points than Pettersson has shots since the trade, which is
there's clearly something up with him, like well beyond whatever it is. It's he cannot perform right now. It's tough to watch. Thatcher Demko, I'm not really sure what the status is there, how long he's actually going to be out. But I do feel pretty sure that the Kevin Lankinen fairy tale is over.
Yeah,
that November, December run.
1B probably.
He's not a 1A.
1B.
You know, Lankinen was great in November, good in December. What we're seeing now is like, yes, this is the goalie that Kevin Lankinen is. Like, he's not something between his early hot stretch and this. Mm-hmm. For years on several different teams, he has been just this.
He was solid in Nashville for one season. But
okay.
Yeah, and with Brock Besser, I think you got to trade him. There's no point. Going back to what we were saying with Boston, if they creep into the playoffs, they lose in the first round, Vancouver would get dismantled by the Winnipeg Jets or who's the number one seed in the Pacific right now? Either of those three teams. The LA Kings would dismantle the Vancouver Canucks right now. So for the sake of the franchise going forward, they also need to move off Brock Besser, and trading Brock Besser, that forward core is like, who even it would be Pettersson, Hedel, Garland, and then like a whole lot of nothing there.
I even would go as far as to say I would, if you have to ask me who's more likely between St. Louis and Vancouver, I would go with St. Louis.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Allow me here to eat shit on the podcast. How about Cam Fowler? How about that trade?
He's been a stud.
He's been incredible in St. Louis. I mean, this is the best hockey he's played since the 2010s. He's playing in St. Louis since that trade.
Yeah. I mean, it's gonna be it's not like he's gonna impact any serious winning in St. Louis, but in terms of actual value, I thought he was
washed up. He's scoring a better than 40-point pace right now in St. Louis.
No. Yeah, he's definitely been good. But again, I just think St. Louis is like the definition of mid West Coast Islanders at this point.
Yeah, I don't see it happening. And maybe it is for the worse that they're kind of creeping up the standings with a buy trade and a new coach instead of just getting that top draft pick in. Rob Thomas has been great. Jordan Kyrou, I still don't really think he plays winning hockey.
Yeah, Buchnevich is a little concerning. His deal kicks in next year, and he's only on pace for like 60 points. It's only $8 million. Actually, $1 million is a decent amount for a guy that's like 30.
Yeah, this could be like the first sign of a real aging regression for him. So that's
I think even last year he was at like 64, 65 points. That's concerning. But you want to move on to our traded or not segment. We talked about some of the teams that are going to be in the hunt and have guys to potentially sell.
Let's do it.
So we'll give out a name. We'll do the classic podcast 3, 2, 1 traded or not traded. Brock Nelson 3, 2, 1 traded.
Not traded.
This is what we think is going to happen, not what we think they should do. You obviously think that he should get traded, but I think he's going to get traded. I think that it's so apparent that this team, for Brock Nelson's own sake, to get him off the Islanders to go play winning hockey, and for the Islanders, based on the sellers market that we've seen, I previously said like a first and a third round pick. I think you get a first and a second round pick or a first and a B+ prospect. At this point, it's genuinely going to be malpractice. I know you might cite like that he's playing tonight against the Winnipeg Jets. I think that's more so final home game. I think I trust Lou to trade him at least. We'll get into a different guy though.
I would never trust Lou to sell, first of all. Second, it's tough to say exactly what the trade market is right now for forwards. We know for defensemen, it's extremely slanted towards being a seller's market. For forwards, I'm not sure that's so clear right now.
That's fair. Yeah, Nyquist got a second. Brock Nelson isn't exactly killing it this season, but the track
He's having a
record.
better year than Nyquist, but like collectively over the last 3 seasons, I'm not necessarily sure I'd rather have him than Nyquist.
That's crazy. Yeah, Nelson has been outside of this season a consistent like 35 and 35 guy.
Nyquist was better last year, I think.
No, he was. Brock Nelson on the Islanders' second line playing with a guy we're talking about soon, Palmieri, and who's even his left winger last season, Anders Lee at times, Holmstrom at times. That's ridiculous. That's absolutely insane. But we'll move on. Jeez. Palmieri, 3, 2, 1, not traded. Okay. This one I think there is some logic to it. No, you definitely still should trade him. But like, he is from Long Island. He might take some cheap deal to retire there, set up his life after hockey. Because who doesn't love Long Island? Where I could at least get on board if he signs some 3-year deal at $4 million or 2-year deal at $4 million. And then we flip him in a year or two from now.
I would be absolutely devastated as an Islanders fan if he got $4 million on his next contract.
He's still really good. What are we
He's still fine. No, he's fine. If he was really good, the Islanders would be winning.
He had 30
games
goals.
Right now.
He had 30 goals. You got to keep on talking while I look this up. He had 30 goals last year. Yeah, wait, would you say if he was still really good, they make the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean,
they've had like 9,000 injuries this year, not to like defend. He has 19 goals, 21 assists, 40 points in 60 games.
That's
what 27 and 27 pays.
I wouldn't want to lock him up on, not that $4 million is huge money, but I think long term, I look at him as like a bottom 6 guy to chip in some offense. Not as like
a 4 or 5 year
liner.
deal would be a disaster. A 2 to 3 year deal at $4 million, I'd be perfectly fine with. I think you love Gustav Nyquist, but if Palmieri might get a first-round pick. If that's
that
the
would
case.
be shocking to me.
Again, he is on pace for 27 and 27 roughly. Like, you're acting like he's a bum. 30 goal scorer last year.
We need to move off your Islanders.
Like,
You're getting
I'm
too
not
emotional.
being biased. I'm not. Maybe it's wishful thinking, but like, he'd get a second and third round pick.
Yeah, I think a second.
He's better than Gustav Nyquist, no doubt. Mikko Rantanen, 3, 2, 1.
Not traded.
Yeah, okay. This one we don't talk about that much. He's just Carolina's rental. Like, if he ends up walking this summer, unless like Colorado wins the Stanley Cup with Nyquist, you're not really losing any sleep. And even then, again, Nyquist would be like the 5th or 6th. It feels like they're like psyching themselves out just because Nyquist has been playing so good and Rantanen hasn't signed. It's not the end of the world if he leaves for nothing. They're gonna have so much salary cap space this summer if he walks to really improve the team it's not the end of the world.
I'm not even convinced that like anyone who's actually involved with the team is overreacting.
Yeah,
the media
probably.
Definitely is.
Media.
The media
Fake
and
news.
some of the fans are in total panic mode. Let's freak out and make a dumb, rash decision based on Rantanen not being amazing for like 10 games. Everyone should calm down, relax, step back, breathe. It will be okay for Rantanen in Carolina.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with that. Next up, Rasmus Ristolainen, 3, 2, 1.
Traded.
Not traded. Damn. I think it's possible. 2 years after this at a reasonable $5.1 million, you're going to have to move out a big money contract because I don't see Philadelphia eating any money on that. So I think that's where it could be something of concern. Why do you think he's going to get traded?
Because I've seen what the trade market looks like this week
Fair.
for big physical defensemen.
Right-handed, yeah.
I don't think Rasmus Ristolainen should get a first-round pick in a trade, but based on the value that Seth Jones and Ryan Lindgren got traded for, I expect he would. And I don't think Philly can afford to turn that down.
Yeah, I think if he's not traded at the deadline, I think he's definitely going to be traded this summer. They have too many young defensemen up in the system where they need to make space. But yeah, just the salary cap might be a little
It
hard.
might be. I think if you're Philly, if you wait until the summer, you lose a lot of leverage because in the summer, I assume there will be other better defensemen that become available. Right now, there's really not.
That is true to a degree, but also like maybe be available through trade. But in terms of free agency, I'd much rather trade a first-round pick to get Rasmus Ristolainen or like first-round pick than sign some like Brady Shea apocalyptic deal just because the salary cap is rising and teams are spending up the wazoo. a 2-buy, basically signing Ristolainen and paying a first to sign Ristolainen into a 2-buy 5.1 makes a lot more sense. Scott Laughton sticking in Philadelphia, 3-2-1
Not traded.
The hell? I think you gotta trade Scott Laughton. If like Ristolainen, I think the first round pick will still be there. Scott Laughton is apparently a first round pick is on the table from like 8 teams or something like that. I think it's insane if they run it back with Scott Laughton.
Every rumor I've seen about Scott Laughton says that Philly's price is absurdly high. Like they're asking for more than a first plus.
But apparently teams might be willing to pay it.
Maybe. I mean, like if they can get a first plus for Scott Laughton, they should do it. What my prediction for what's going to happen is Philly will ask for a super high price. No one will meet that price. And Philly's going to say, okay, we still have him for another year. Let's shop him in the summer instead.
That's fair.
Should Philly just take the first round pick and run instead of getting greedy? They probably should, but that's not what I'm predicting to happen.
Yeah, $3 million, I will say, is decently easy to fit for this season. A lot of teams have that 5.1 for Ristolainen. That's a little tougher, but $3 million. Again, we talk about Brock Nelson, $6 million cap hit right now, have retained $3 million. So I think Scott Laughton's a lot easier to move, only has a year and a half left. A lot of teams have third-line center issues where Scott Laughton fits it. Sticking with centers and potential third-line center, Braden Shen, 3-2-1, not traded. Yeah, there's too much term on this one, and he's already regressing like massively.
It's an ugly contract. I don't think he actually would make most contending teams better the way he's been playing. That's not a new this year thing either. We've seen a couple year trend of decline, and it's just going to keep hitting harder. The money's ugly. I hate the contract. Yeah. I don't see why any team like who honestly who would even want him is my question. Not like he's the worst player in the world, but I don't see
I could see Bradshaw living like. St. Louis is going to have to eat like $2 million, but even if I'm St. Louis, I think I'm just waiting till this offseason when you potentially have more suitors, when some GM convinces himself that Braden Shen 3 years left at $5 million is appetizing. Again, going back to Ristolainen, that's tough to move at the deadline. But couple more. Ivan Provorov, I think we can just like not even say it.
He's
not trading. Yeah,
no.
that's
Columbus is going in.
That they would have to get like 2 first-round picks at this point. I don't even know if they got a first and a second round offer that they would do that.
Like the fan impact, like the economic to keep the team like in people's minds impact of selling in this situation, I don't think it's possible for them.
Yeah, you could not get the team on board. Brock Besser, 3-2-1.
Not traded.
Wow. Okay, you don't think he gets traded. I thought when we were talking about the Vancouver Canucks that would be apparent. There's the contract negotiations have completely stalled. He's going to be hitting the unrestricted free agent market. He would get like a 7x8 on the open market. And if I'm him, I'm not too keen on re-signing in Vancouver considering they're such a mess. So I think he gets traded.
All of those arguments make sense, but my gut tells me Vancouver's going to try to make the playoffs and salvage this season.
Yeah, they are. They are a greedy ownership group. Apparently, they just want that the 2 home playoff games. Ryan Donato, 3-2-1, traded. Got to trade. I'm like 28 years old. I think 29 this summer. If Davidson signs him to some like 5x5, all goodwill is out the window from the Seth Jones trade. Like, take your first round pick. He's having an insane contract year. He's never been close to this production, I believe. Don't get fooled. He's not like some serious impact guy for Connor Bedard. It's the development. Trade him for the first, and then maybe flip that first and the first from Seth Jones to actually get a high impact guy.
He reminds me of Kevin Hayes near the end of his first big contract, where he gets traded to Winnipeg for a first. He's having a great year. Has a really rough time and struggles in Winnipeg, then signs a monster contract in Philly, which has been a total disaster. But getting a first-round pick for him...
in Pittsburgh now? I don't even know.
He is, yeah. But getting a first-round pick for him in the first place off of his best season ever was good work. Yeah. It'll be good work for Chicago to do the same thing. And I agree with you. Anyone signing him in like the $6 million, God forbid, $7 million range this summer is going to be really disappointed with what they end up with.
And then lastly, Casey Middlestat, 3-2-1, not traded. Yeah, Colorado's already been so active at this deadline. I don't think teams can, like the Islanders. The Islanders trade Brock Nelson for Casey Middlestat in a second-round pick. I will lose my goddamn mind. Like, that would be brutal. Trade him in the offseason. Right now, you're not getting much for him. And, yeah, it's a tough situation. He's been so bad.
I mean,
basically since the first month of the season.
actually, him for Nelson is the one kind of situation where I can see it. Like, if the idea is Colorado is going to trade him in like the Nyquist, right? You do a kind of maybe a 3-team swing where you give him up and end up with a better current player out of it. I can maybe see that.
If
but
it's
I don't
Middlestat
expect
and a
that.
first-round pick, sure, and then we flip Middlestat this summer, I could be down for that. You want to talk about the Oscars for a little
do
bit?
An Adrian Brody length speech here to end it off.
Yeah, Brody won. I think the AI is a little bit overstated just because it is when he speaks Hungarian. It's not good. It's not good for the industry, but like people just being like, oh, his performance is AI does kind of piss me off a little bit, especially when they're so mad over just like a Bob Dylan impression, if I'm gonna be honest. Coleman Domingo should have won Best Actor. What's your thoughts on the Best Actor controversy?
Everyone in Hollywood has been saying for years and years that Adrian Brody is just like insufferable to be around.
Yeah.
Like he's not a criminal, he's not a pervert like some people around there. He's just like completely insufferable and no one wants to work with him or put him in movies. He proved that really well by making the longest speech in Oscars history. True stat.
15:45 or 5 minutes 45 seconds.
Absolute rambling nonsense about nothing. It didn't build towards anything. He stuttered through it. It was brutal and embarrassing to watch. And that speech made me wish that Chalamet won it.
That's fair.
I don't think people realize how thirsty Chalamet was for this award or how hard he campaigned. Chalamet's next decade is going to put Leo's Oscar chase to shame.
Yeah, in the social media era, Chalamet was everywhere. Like, I'm trying to think. It started at the game day appearance, but he was just reciting a script, but it was really funny, just him breaking down film. But yeah, he's been everywhere for the last 3 months. It's insane. Once he brought Kylie Jenner, I knew he was losing.
He won the SAG, which he did not bring Kylie to that show. It was his only win of awards season. It was the Screen Actors Guild when he didn't bring Kylie.
Yeah, you got to be like Adrian Brody and be married or dating Harvey Weinstein's ex-wife. Class. No, it's obviously a joke. Best Picture, Nora. It wasn't my favorite movie. I obviously Dune 2 is my number one movie. Substance was number 2. It was still within my top 10. Makes sense. Great for the industry. Indie film wins it off like a $5 million budget. So that's cool. I like Sean Baker. Red Rocket's a great movie. Watch Red Rocket. I think Red Rocket's better than Anora. What do you think about that?
Watch Florida Project.
Yeah,
I think Florida Project's better than Anora.
Yeah, definitely.
But I do think Anora is good. It's good for the industry that something small and independent would win. Third time ever that the Palme d'Or and the Oscars matched up. So that's fun trivia out there. The movie premiered in festivals over the summer before getting to America in the fall. It's not super fun to me that, Baker swept across the board. Just me personally, I would appreciate it when they kind of split awards up, share them around. I don't think anyone needed to see Baker give 4 different speeches, but his speeches were good and about
He understands
things,
it. Yeah,
so.
he doesn't make it about himself. He's just like, support movies, go to the movies, independent filmaking. That was
support
cool. Yeah.
sex workers, which is not the easiest thing in the world to say on primetime television, but he said it.
Yeah, that was that was interesting. Trying to think any other upsets. Conclave, I'm happy. Like I think I predicted it, but like that would have just been such a vanilla. It's like the perfect B+, A- Oscar bait. Ray Fiennes is good in it, not great. I don't know.
Mikey Madison winning.
Yes.
Surprise.
I'm happy for that because she's way better than Demi Moore. Demi Moore is great in The Substance, and I like that movie overall more, but that's because of the directing. Corley Fajol, I think, should have been ahead of Sean Baker in a potential Best Director, not because of Demi Moore. Demi Moore plays the role, but it's a lot of just like her being sad and not really
I think they're
emoting.
both good performances and both deserving. I think either would have been fine. But, clearly the love for Anora was there that it would win through everything.
Yeah, and supporting actor and actress went to 2 leads. That's always, you love to see that happen.
It's not great, but to be fair, we all already knew it beforehand.
Yeah. Zoe Saldana had more screen time than Sophia Gascon.
Who managed to lose the
there?
movie international feature by her tweets.
And she was there.
Crazy.
Conan went at her. I was
not expecting that.
That was a good moment. And she took it like a champ. But hopefully I'm waiting for the 2027 Oscars with
Dune 3.
Dune 3, The Odyssey, all that when that all comes out next year. I don't even know. It's they probably have pre odds already out for that. But yeah, thanks for watching the pod, listening to the pod. We'll probably be back either Friday or Saturday.
Depends how crazy the trade deadline
If it's just Ryan Donato and Scott Laughton getting traded, probably Saturday. If it's all hell breaks loose like last year the day wasn't that crazy, but like Tomas Hertl got traded at 3 p.m. We'll be back on Friday night probably. Thank you guys for watching. Appreciate it. We'll be seeing you in the next one. Peace.